Oftentimes, empowerment comes with just explaining what it is that you need to do. It's not always about just giving people things to do. Giving them things to do without explaining the bigger picture is oftentimes going to set people up for failure, and we don't want to do that.
Chad Peterman here, and you are listening to Can't Stop the Growth, a platform for leaders and teams to grow and thrive. We highlight the importance of personal development, pursuing greatness, and always chasing your potential. Let's get into it.
Today, we're going to talk about the law of empowerment, the key to multiplying leadership and growing those on your team. So when we think about empowerment, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, right? We talk about it a lot around here, empowering our people, allowing them to grow, different things like that. And so I think there's some keys in that, in how I've kind of learned over the last, call it, 6-8 months of, if there is a lack of empowerment or we're not getting the results that we're getting, why is that? We may be sitting there saying, well, shit, I've empowered them to make a decision, but they're not making the right decision, or they're not making the decision that I would want made. And so then I then lose trust in their ability to do something. And I think if there's one thing that I've learned, is there's a number of things that go into that it's not just about allowing someone to do something. There's a lot more that goes into that. And so when we think about empowerment, fortunately or unfortunately, we've probably all worked for someone or been involved in something where there was a lack of empowerment, right? It was the leader who we were working for, kept a lot of the power, more importantly, kept a lot of the knowledge to themselves. And I think that can be extremely frustrating. I think sometimes we don't even realize, whether we're in a leadership position or we're, being led by somebody, when there is a lack of empowerment. Yeah, we may bump up against that ceiling, but sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And so to be empowered, we also have to be educated. We also have to be informed. And as the leader, we have to educate and inform, or else someone is not going to be empowered. We can say, go make all the decisions you want, but if they don't have the relevant information to make a good decision, well, then we're setting them up for failure. And so as Maxwell talks about it, it's about giving power away to create stronger teams and future leaders. Now, giving power away is not how we're wired. I've got a pretty sneaky suspicion. And, what do they say? That you're more than likely going to surround your people that think a lot like you. Well, I am one that naturally am kind of a control freak. You can ask my wife. I like things to be a certain way. She always gets on me. She goes, you do realize that we just made up that time that we were going to leave the house. I go, yes, I'm aware. We said 12. And so at 11:55, we better be heading on out the door. Well, she's like, well, that's made up. I'm like, well, yeah, but we set the time. We're gonna leave at this time. That's just what we've kind of planned out. Always on the weekends, I she'll usually sleep in. I'll get up with the kids, and I'll want to come up and go over the itinerary for the day. Does not like that at all. So, I don't need an itinerary. We don't have any plans. We don't need to do anything. I was like, well, I just thought we'd set out a schedule, and, this is what we're going to do, and this is what we have planned, and not liking that. So I get that piece, giving up power, control. If you ever want to have a first class lesson in that, just have kids, because then you are not in control. They run your schedule and when you're going to do things. And if you set out to get in bed by a certain time, by God, they're going to give you hell trying to go to bed. It just works out like that. And so when we think about empowerment and giving up that control that, probably a lot of us struggle with, right? And I think some of that control comes with, as you learn more and you get really good at what you do, it's hard to give it up, right? It's like, well, shoot, they don't know all the stuff that I know. They don't know, all of these things, and all of these things bouncing around in my brain. And so when we think about why we struggle, number one is kind of that fear of losing control, right? Like someone else is going to have to make this decision. And so I would rather keep it to feel safe. Perfectly normal. I think that's human, right? Is to want to, when I know how to do something, I want to do it. But we know, on the other hand, that in order to scale, in order to get bigger, in order to grow other people, we've got to give up some of that power. And I think the other piece is, and I think this is a smaller piece, but when we have someone on our team that's really strong, I think that there's a little piece of that is kind of that fear of being kind of outshined, right? That fear of, oh crap, if I empower this person really too much, hey, am I going to be looking for a job? Like, what's going on? And, the way that I've always thought about that is when we do have strong people on the team, the more that we can breathe into them, the higher they're going to lift us up, right? That is the goal of this, is to grow the people on our team. And if we grow them and we too keep growing, well, then we're always going to be, moving up together. And so I think that is a legitimate fear. I think it's one of the smaller ones. I think just losing control is probably the biggest of them. And then I think the other one is lack of trust. So if we don't believe in our team, it's going to be very hard to empower them to do things, right? And I think this comes back to when we bring someone onto the team, rather than looking at them for all their shortcomings, all of their flaws, like, what are they really good at? It's my job to put you in a place to be successful. It's my job to educate and inform you so that you can go carry out those things. And so when we think about empowerment, when we think about how we do this effectively, we have to think about, what does it actually do for us? Well, we know that, by empowering others, we're going to create more capable leaders. We're going to create those people on the team that, hey, they can go run with this. They have the information, they can knock it out. And I think when we think about this multiplication effect, this, empowerment creates addition, creates growth. What we have to understand is that empowerment, like I said at the beginning, is not always just giving people things to do. It's more so explaining the why behind why things are going to be done a certain way. And I think if there's ever an area where there is potentially a lack of empowerment, or, you feel overwhelmed and it's like, my team can't really help me, how are we going to figure this out? A lot of the times it's because we haven't given them the information. And I don't think that in most circumstances that is I'm going to hoard all the power because I want it all. It's more so we just forget to tell them, right? Like, there's a number of things over the last couple of weeks that we found out that it's like, oh, well, yeah, I guess we never told you that. So I can see why you wouldn't think like I'm thinking about this certain problem, because you don't know what the damn goal is, or you don't know what we're trying to do. And there again, that's on us, but what can we do to inform them? What can we do to give them information so that they're like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I get why you want me to do it like this, because that's ultimately going to drive this outcome. And I think that's easy to do, right? It's, you get caught up in the day and it's like, I got all these things bouncing around in my head and these are the ideas and I know how to execute it, and just do that so I can keep doing all of this. When if we just take a moment to explain, hey, this is why I'm asking you to do this. Does that make sense? Like, this is the overall strategy. This is what we're trying to carry out. And I think that is, if there's one thing that I notice when things aren't going the way that we want them, it's usually having to sit down and go, hey, do you understand like why we're doing this? Like, what the purpose of this is? And oftentimes it's like, no, I did not know that, did not realize that. And that's okay. That's part of growing in as a leader, is like, oh crap, I totally forgot to do that. It's not that you were doing a bad job. It's just, hey, that's how we're going to learn. And if we can give them more information, if we can give them the why, ultimately, we're probably going to increase that engagement in what they are doing. We're going to increase the loyalty with which they have, like, oh my gosh, they explain kind of the bigger picture. And I think that that's easy. As we've grown, we've seen it, right? You silo things because now this isn't just a couple of people, it's a whole department and they got to do their things. And we forget to connect the dots all the way across the organization. To me, that is one of our things that we have to work really, really hard on, because we are so big and we are spread out and we have a lot of people who do individual jobs that need to understand the big picture, right? And we've got to do a better job of that. And so that's what I've kind of been working on is, really diving in to find out what is it that people know? What is it that they need to know? And what could they do if they had this information? What would that look like, right? And so when you think about the people you lead, what information do they not have? Again, not that you're trying to keep it for some, like, oh, shoot, if I tell them what's going to happen, but it's more so, hey, they have an individualized job, but what is their impact on the whole? And what are other things could they understand? Yeah, a dispatcher doesn't need to know how to be a plumber, but what things about plumbing would help them get the right tech to the right call? What things about the goal would help them drive the technicians for more, whatever it is. And so that's just a small example, but just things that we're looking at, right? When we look at, I need more calls. Great. Well, understanding how marketing works and how much a lead costs. I remember one of the changes that Matt and Callista made, that's been months ago now, was informing people in the call center how much a lead cost. And when it comes in from this lead source, that probably means we paid a few $100s for that lead. So we want to book that thing. And I remember the reaction. They were like, yeah, when we gave them that information, they're like, oh my God, I had no idea. Again, not pertinent, but does it help drive their performance if they're aware of how much that lead cost and how important it is to book it, or else we're out $200 on that particular lead. Very small stuff. Like, not a lot of this is like, yeah, I'm holding all the information back from this person so that they basically fall flat on their face. Like, we've given them some to be successful, but what are those extra things that we could add on that's going to empower them even more? And so when we think about getting people the information that they need, what is that ultimately going to do? Well, ultimately, you want those people making those decisions. You want those people coming up with plans, because a lot of times someone looking at it from a different perspective can offer insights that we didn't think about, right? Like, oh, shoot, yeah, that's a really good way to think about that. Or I didn't even look at it that way. And so the more minds we can get thinking about solving the big problem, even though they may have an individualized task, the better we're going to be, right? When someone is heads down looking at one singular problem, they've got one perspective, you've got a bigger perspective. But if we start to combine those, that's what ultimately leads to empowerment. That's what leads to people being more engaged because they feel like they have a bigger say in the outcome of what's happening. And so when we think about that, when we think about how do we get to that place where we can do that, where that comes natural, right? I think the first thing is we have to kind of shift that mindset. And it's tough. It's tough when you've been doing this a while. You know all of the things. It comes natural. That's just how your brain operates because you've been doing it for a while, right? I run into this all the time. I've got a notebook on my desk that has upwards of probably 30 new ideas in it. Well, you know what I know? I've got to do a really, really good job of selling that idea and working through all the details, or else it's going to fall flat on its face, right? I'm an idea person. So I come up with things and then want to put them in action. But I also know that I can't do that all by myself. I've got to empower people with, here's what I'm thinking. This is why I'm thinking it. And it's frustrating. If there's one thing I hate, it's that I used to just be able to go roll out a new idea in about 30 seconds. Walk down the hall and go, hey, we're going to give this a whirl. Well, I can't do that today. And it sucks. I hate it. But it is what it is. And the cool part is while it takes a little bit longer to roll out, the impact is that much greater because we have a big team, right? Yeah, I could roll out this new whiz-bang idea, but I only had 2 techs actually carrying it out. So they could only run so many calls. So the lift was not as great, even though it was quicker. And what I've learned is just be patient, make sure everybody's on the same page, make sure everybody understands the big global picture of why we're trying to do this. And I still fail, 100%. I'm sure there's some of you who are like, yep, you got that right, probably an hour ago. but I'm trying. All right. And I think that's the hard part is we want to grow, but it takes others to help us grow. If we're intent on just growing by ourselves, if we're intent on, well, it's okay, I'll make all the decisions, I've got this covered. Yes, 100% you can. But wouldn't it be better if you had 3 or 4 other people on your team that could also make that decision and were thinking just like you? There's no better feeling than having someone on your team who gets it and they're running, right? And they're knocking things out. They're running at a very high clip. And I think that's where we are able to identify these leaders that need more and more empowerment. How do we give you more and more stuff to go tackle and figure it out? Now, again, as a leader, it's our job to set them up for success. Just simply giving somebody a task because we think they're ready without explaining kind of the why behind this is how we do it. Do you understand? Walk with me through this is, we don't want to set them up for failure. I think the other thing is just that mentoring and support, right? There's delegation, which is kind of a buzzword, right? I need to delegate more. I need to delegate more. Well, I think it's important to understand how in the hell do you do that? Do you just delegate by telling someone to do something, or do we delegate and then we support? Hey, I'm going to trust you to do this. I'm going to watch you and kind of follow along and make sure that we've got this all dialed in. But, by the end of the week, I think you'll be ready to run. What does that look like? And so when we mentor and support them, well, then we need to follow that up with celebrating their success, right? It's not delegate and forget. It's delegate and then inspect what we expect and celebrate when we win. And so when we think about that, when we think about how do I do this, it's first shifting our mindset into I'm going to try to empower these people. But oftentimes empowerment comes with just explaining what it is that you need to do. It's not always about just giving people things to do. Giving them things to do without explaining the bigger picture is oftentimes going to set people up for failure, and we don't want to do that. When we think about who we could empower this week, what does that look like? What information do the people on our team need to be successful? For the longest time, our field professionals didn't know what it was to win. They literally did not know what a good day was, right? So if they didn't know what a good day was, what do you think that they equated that good day to? Probably not being out late, getting some decent calls, maybe not having to get into a crawl space, not running into anything super challenging. All of these things were probably the way that they judged winning in a day. And so when we rolled out the KPIs, I remember a couple of the guys were like, oh, this is great. I actually know what a good day looks like. Like, these are the things that I need to achieve in order to move up, in order to, grow my career, make more money, whatever it may be. When we rolled that out, all of a sudden, guys were like, if you look at the KPI dashboard from a year ago compared to here, yeah, we're not where we want. We always want to get a little bit better, but we're a hell of a lot better than we were a year ago. Now, we're not running any different calls. Now, the guys have probably gotten a little bit better over the course of the year, let's hope. But I think the biggest reason is they know what winning looks like. They know how they can continue to grow. And to me, that is empowerment. We didn't empower them with any new task. We said, go be a plumber, go be an electrician. Like, same thing we told them to do a year ago, but we empowered them with information. And so when you think about it on the empowerment side, what information does your team need to drive performance? A lot of it is information based. So when we think about it like that, is empowerment really that difficult? It can sound overwhelming, right? Like, I got to give up this and I got to give up that. What I've understood is you don't really give up anything. When you empower people with information, they take it. They take it and they run with it. And then all of a sudden, it doesn't sound as scary. Like, Well, if I just train them to do this and give them all this information, all of a sudden they're going to be running with this. And I'm going to wake up one day and go, I used to have to do that, but so-and-so is just really running with that. And I really don't have to worry about it. Yeah, I'm going to check in. I'm going to inspect to make sure that we've got everything moving in the right direction, but they're going to take it. So I look at it as empowerment as not so much giving up, but how do you provide a platform so that the people on your team can take it? Because one, selfishly, when they take it, it's a lot easier to quote unquote give away, right? When they take it. And what can you do? What questions can you ask of your manager to take more? What things are you not thinking about? What things are you maybe thinking about in your silo versus the bigger picture of probably what your manager is driving towards, right? Because your manager is the link between all the departments. It's my belief that we need to work to create a link between all of the people that we manage and the other departments. That doesn't mean that we need to, they need to be on the phone 24/7 with them. They need to do their job. But what if a person in the call center knew how important it was to put leads on the board so that we could hit our budget and what hitting our budget actually means, right? Why do we set a budget? We set a budget so that we can, much like you do in your personal life, so that we can make sure that we got enough money to pay all the bills, make a little bit of money, pay everybody, do all the things, right? Well, to me, making sure that every person in the chain knows how important their role is and how they play a role in driving towards that budget. Yes, they are going to be, how do I get good in my role? How do I do those things? But when they know the bigger picture, when they know the why behind the things that we do and why we do it, I think we become stronger. I think your organization becomes stronger via empowerment, but I think it's how we look at empowerment. I think that is the shift that gets us in a place where we are watching people take responsibility and just go after it. And then what does your team start to look like? So many people, I would assume, if I asked you, well, how do you build leaders on your team? It's a pretty vague freaking question, right? I don't know. Meet with them, be there to answer questions. I don't know that I could give you an answer. But what I do know is that the more that we pour into our people with the knowledge, with the understanding of what we're thinking about, the more they will build themselves. Because that's what it's about, right? We want to create a platform where people can take information and build themselves. We're supporting, but we're not pulling them, right? We don't need to pull anybody, but we have to pull them if they don't have all the necessary information to be technically empowered. Does that make sense? Like how we're looking at this? I think it's important to distinguish that. I think empowerment is where you're going to grow your team. And if we want better results, it's breathing into these people so that they can then take the information and rise to a new level. And when people are rising to a new level within those departments, all of a sudden, we all get better. That dispatcher's better, that plumber's better, that install crew's better. As everybody starts to move, well, then ultimately, the company starts to move as well.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to connect with me personally, you can find me at chadmpeterman.com. To see what our team's up to, you can visit petermanbros.com. Don't forget to check out the YouTube channel and consider joining the CSTG Arena. As always, keep growing out there.